Grief is such an overpowering emotion, especially after losing someone so close to you. It can take months, years, even decades to get back to normal, if that's even possible after experiencing a significant loss. This podcast was created to help you move through and release the emotions, allowing you to heal the hurt and begin living again. Listen in as I chat with medical professionals, grief workers, and people who have first-hand experience in losing a loved one, what their experience has been, and what they did to help heal themselves and those around them. Life isn't always sunshine and rainbows, but I believe there is always a silver lining if you're willing to look. Welcome to the Release Podcast. Hi, welcome to another episode of Release Grief Podcast. Today I'm here with Miss Kathy Gleason, and I met her through the Grief Global, it's the Grief Global Network, but that's not where I met her from. It was the Grief Global Conference a couple years ago where I did like a couple different presentations, just trying to get my feet wet with talking about grief because it's so damn hard. Like even for me going through it, other people going through it, like you don't know what to say, you don't know what to do, you don't know what to think, all these things. And so I met her a couple years ago and she's just been fantastic. So welcome to the podcast, Kathy. Thank you so much for joining us. And what brought you in? Because this is specifically about grief. So what brought you in to be on this podcast?
Well, my own grief has brought me to where I am today. And actually, my grief started decades ago, literally decades ago, with the very first traumatic one that I remember was the loss of my father.
Okay.
And he died just after I got married. So he wasn't able to even give me away at my wedding, the wedding you dream of. Generations ago, there wasn't much people did for grief. So I just kind of stuffed that, went on about my life. Shortly after that, a few years after that, I lost an infant child, less than 24 hours old.
Sorry.
That I never got to hold or even see, never even saw a picture because he was whisked away to a different hospital to be cared for. Again, move on, grow up, go back to work. And then getting into the closer decades, I lost my mom. I was more active with that process because she was in a nursing home and I worked at that very same nursing home. So that was a challenge going from my job up to the floor she was on to kind of visit with her a while or give the nurses some help. She tended toward delusions and hallucinations and some quite erratic behavior. And I would attempt to calm her down. The most recent in my life was my husband, and that's been just a little over 5 years ago now. That was the one that really, really hit me. In retrospect, some of it may have been an accumulation of the other grief that I never fully processed.
Yeah.
I've been far more aware of that now. But because of all that grief, I just found myself led. I opened my mind, I guess, and I just watched for signs, and it led me to start my own podcast about grief. And that was 2.5 years ago. So I've been doing that, got immersed in the Global Grief Network, met Faith. And when I saw your post about looking for guests, I thought, there's kind of another aspect besides all the grief I've suffered with loved ones dying, especially my husband. There's this other grief that during this process, I'm aging. And with age comes more physical challenges. So I find that I'm grieving the physical status that I don't have anymore. That coupled with the loss of my husband creates a really curious situation. For example, I don't have anyone to rub lotion on my back.
Right.
Okay. So what do I do? The big pieces of grief you realize, but those little tiny details are what's lacking. So I kind of wanted to point that out, is that that's part of grief as well. If you lose a partner and you find yourself alone, there's also that kind of side effect of grief,
Right.
that you
The little
also struggle
things.
with that as you age. Yeah. So I reached out to you and said, what about this aspect?
Absolutely. I think that I've said it before, and I'll say it again, like I believe that we as humans, we experience grief from the moment we're born till the moment we pass.
I agree.
We're always in different stages of grief,
Mhm.
and in different grief situations, if that makes sense. So
It
like you
does.
have all the way from loss all the way down to, well, that wasn't what I wanted. Like McDonald's messed up my order for the day. Like that is a form
Right.
of grief because,
It
you know,
is.
you didn't get what you wanted. Like it didn't work out for you.
Mhm.
And so handling those and navigating those. And so I think that grief, aging grief, or however you want to term it, is very viable as well. Because I know I'm not getting any younger.
Mhm.
There's things about my youth that I would have loved to, that like I wish I could do now, but I can't, you know, because of
Sure.
my age or different things like that. So that totally makes sense. And compounding the grief, you know, from your father to your
Mhm.
infant to your mother to your husband,
Mhm.
like, and I know for me as well, going back, it doesn't, when I was younger, we didn't talk about grief. You didn't
No,
go to the counselor for grief. You didn't,
no,
you just like, okay, yeah, that's great. Okay, you got like 6 hours off. Now get back to work. Let's
exactly.
moving. You know, the
Well,
bills.
even the companies, they give you 3
Yeah,
days, right?
that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
Yeah,
it was on a weekend. Like, aren't you ready to go by Monday?
sure.
Yeah, and so it doesn't, I think that grief in this day and age has come a long way, but there's still so much further for it to go. Um,
Yes.
we're just now starting to talk about it, and people still don't want to talk about it.
No, it's a
How
difficult
have
topic for sure.
So tell me some of the ways, because I know you talked about the compounding of the grief,
Mhm.
and now the little idiosyncrasies of like the things that you're finding now that your spouse is gone. And
Mhm.
then with that aging process, because you know, I don't know about you, but for me, I always dreamed of me and my husband smacking each other with canes on the front porch when we're like 100, you
Yeah.
know. But what
Oh, yeah.
happens when one of those people aren't there?
Yeah.
Then you're left with doing all those things. And so tell me a little bit about that. How difficult has that transition been? Um,
Um, Absolutely. Tom and I, when I met Tom, he didn't like to travel. I love to travel. So we went on a couple cruises together, and then he finally caught the bug. Loved going different places. He just loved people. He would see someone standing in line at the grocery store, and 5 minutes later they were fast friends.
right.
That was just his nature. I'm more of an introvert,
Okay.
so anywhere I go, even now, I kind of miss having Tom there as the buffer because he
Right.
would always get us started in some of the most wonderful conversations, and I met some of the most terrific people. So now I have to try to do that myself. I really try to push myself to do some of those things. Traveling is much more difficult. Now, if I want to travel with someone, I travel with my brother and his wife. And they're lovely people, and I don't feel at all like the extra person. If anything,
Right.
my brother probably does because we kind of harass him. But you have to adapt so many
Right.
things that they're just not the same. Certainly not what you wanted. You have to try to find joy to kind of take away that sadness. Sometimes it's a little bittersweet, perhaps. But I personally have just tried to continue doing the things that we wanted to do together and
Mhm.
just find a way to try to find the pleasant things, the positive things in those activities.
Oh, yeah. That makes perfect sense. How long were you guys married?
We were only married about 12 years. We married late in life, and
Mhm.
I actually met him when his middle son dated my younger daughter for about
Okay.
6 months. That's how we met, but we were both married at the time. And then later we kind of ran into each other, discovered we were both single, started dating, and then got married.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah, yeah.
What did your kids think about that?
Well, his kids decided to request the song Another One Bites the Dust at our wedding. Yeah, yeah. My girls were kinder. They chose Love Shack, which is a song that I disliked for ages. So in their ways, they were both very happy about it. And I still see his kids, they still are in my life.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's interesting that his son dated your daughter. That's why I
Yeah.
was asking that question. I'm like, Hmm. That's pretty funny. I like that.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
Yep.
how long ago was it where you had lost your infant child? Like, what year was
That
that?
was in 1973.
Okay.
Decades. I'm 73 now, in fact, just turned 73. So
Oh,
when I
wow.
say decades ago, I mean decades ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So there's so much wrapped around with that because as you know, I lost my
Yes.
daughter and then,
Uh-huh.
years later I lost a granddaughter.
Yeah.
And so, but I had formed a relationship with them. And as a mother, you automatically form a relationship,
Yeah.
when you're pregnant with the child.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You just have
Yeah.
all of these expectations of holding that
Hmm.
baby when you give birth. And I just
Hmm.
I couldn't imagine not being able to hold that baby. So walk me through like some of the signs and symptoms you were feeling or emotions like after the fact of losing your baby.
Well, it was really difficult, and a lot of it's hazy, maybe because of time and maybe just because of the trauma that I just kind of pushed aside. Again, I don't think I fully grieved that. Of course, I didn't even know what grief really was. But
Right.
I remember that a feeling of emptiness, and I still have that feeling of emptiness. Um, it, our son Lee was buried in a grave in a cemetery local. I have never been back to the grave. I went once.
Okay.
My family didn't allow me to go to the funeral even.
Oh, wow.
So it was just this emptiness. And how do you grieve something that you never really physically saw? The only connection I have is during the pregnancy. And it was full term, and I acquired an infection in the hospital, and things went downhill very, very quickly. But
Oh,
so probably in the last 5 years since I lost my husband, these other losses have come back. This is the toughest one for me because I find when I dwell on it more and really try to rationalize what happened, how did I feel, how did I move forward, where did I where did I go wrong, so to speak? Why couldn't I fully grieve this? This one is the most difficult. It's most difficult to comprehend, to absorb, and even to emote to.
right. Oh, I could imagine. It's because it was almost like you were kept away from everything about it.
Right, right.
Um,
I was. And like I say, not even a picture. Today somebody would have snapped a photo with their phone. Well, in
right,
the 70s, we didn't have those cell phones.
right,
So there was no ability to do that. Um, so it's a huge, huge empty feeling in my life, a huge void, even
right.
today.
Oh, for sure. I could imagine.
Mhm.
It, yeah. I, I'm so sorry for your loss. That is
Thank you. And like
math.
you say, you can't imagine not knowing, not seeing, not touching that
Right,
baby. I can't imagine what it's like to have felt hugged, cared for, and been attached to, been bonded like that, and
right,
then to suffer the loss of a child. I can't imagine that.
right. And that's a pretty fascinating point. Thank you for bringing that up because we walk through, I think, a lot of these situations and grief. I call them events.
Hmm.
Um, in our own little world with our own little
Hmm.
perceptions on them. And then like someone else comes in with a different one, like ours are total opposites. They're
Sure.
the same in certain aspects, but they're total
Hmm.
opposites.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I couldn't imagine that. And you're like, I couldn't either.
I can't. I mean, it would be, I don't know that I could go on living, in all honesty.
I gotta
So,
say, it was very tough. Very tough.
maybe one of the things that saved me, so to speak, all these years is the fact that I didn't have that physical bond with my newborn. I don't
And that
know. I
could
can
be,
only
yeah.
theorize. I can only theorize.
Yeah. It's amazing how we try to rationalize everything like after the fact, like, okay, well, this must have happened because of,
Right, right.
or um well, maybe there was something with me that caused
Hmm.
this, or
Yeah,
things like that. Um, instead of just like, okay, this happened. Let's deal with it. Let's
right.
think about it. Let's feel the emotions. Let's move through it. Let's honor
Right.
it, and then let's keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. And the keep going part, we did request an autopsy
Mhm.
after Lee died. And I was told by the doctor that it was just a freak thing that happened, the infection, and there was no reason I couldn't get pregnant again and have another child. So the result of all that first was my daughter Stephanie, who actually I now live with, her and her family,
Oh, good.
as I age. And she is not only my daughter, she is my best friend.
Oh,
And we are
good.
very, very close, very close. And then my younger daughter Kelly came after that. Also a difficult pregnancy. Stephanie's was textbook. I mean, she could have been the Gerber baby. Um, but at any rate, so, there were blessings after that. I was very fortunate for that. I know some women are not that lucky that,
Right.
they lose whether miscarriage or at full term, whatever, and then they never get to experience a child. So I do count myself blessed for at least having been able to have my two daughters, and they're both very special to me.
Well, good. That's fantastic. And so you mentioned that you had like your father had passed away.
Mhm.
Were you close to your father?
I was very close to my father, and we talked about my wedding. He got a diagnosis of cancer shortly after I got engaged.
Okay.
And we, of course, moved the wedding up just a little bit in hopes that he would be able to recover by that point and give me away. But he had chemo, and I don't think he had any radiation. I'm not sure that was really part of the cancer treatment in those years, but I know he had chemo and then he declined shortly after. He was
Okay.
in the hospital when I got married. He couldn't even be at my ceremony. So that was a difficult loss as well, was the absence of my father to give me away. So my brother took over in his Air Force dress blues, and that was nice too.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, my father, so in 2005, my father passed away from cancer.
I'm
It went very
sorry.
quickly for him. So
Yeah.
I was always a daddy's girl, always.
Yeah.
And in December, he hadn't been feeling well, and my mom tried to get him to go to the doctor, and he wouldn't go. And then
Mm,
I met my current husband, and I was going to introduce them to my parents, because we didn't live in the same states. It was a big deal, like travel down there, whatever. My father was a truck
right.
driver, so my mom requested him to be home off the road so that he
Uh-huh.
could meet my new boyfriend. And so
Hmm.
I went down there, it was Easter of 2005, and oh, you could see that he was sick. You could tell that he
Mm.
wasn't feeling good, I should say. By I think it was June or July, he went in and got tested and found out that he had
Mm.
pancreatic cancer, and by August
Oh,
he was gone. And
yeah.
so he didn't, and my husband and I, we met in February of '05 and got married in October of '05. So he wasn't at my wedding either, didn't walk me down
Yeah.
the aisle, none of that.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, it's those little things that, especially like when you're a daddy's girl,
Sure.
that you miss these things. Like they're
Absolutely.
very poignant in your mind that those things didn't happen. You didn't get the traditional stuff. Like,
Well, certainly, and it carries on for years because I know I see my grandsons and I think, oh, my dad would have loved them,
yes.
you know?
Oh yeah, my boys still remember grandpa because
Yeah,
my
yeah.
dad would come over at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and scoop the
Hmm.
boys up and take them out on the truck with him, for local
Exactly.
lunch, whatever.
Sure, sure.
And they
Yeah,
remember that stuff.
sure they
And
do.
they're like, oh, I wish grandpa was here. And I do too,
Hmm.
like I wish grandpa
Yeah,
was here to
yeah,
see the life
yeah.
that we built, the things that we've done, the kids and grandkids and and stuff like that. His great
Absolutely.
grandkids.
That's what was supposed to happen.
Right. I agree with that. I agree with
Yeah,
that. And
yeah.
it's amazing how we still keep continuing on even when things like this happen.
Hmm.
It's almost like we do it in spite of ourselves. Like we're just keep going, like, what else do I
I
do?
think I think we feel that we have to. That's what we have to do.
Right.
Yeah, and sometimes I think that's why grief hits us so hard because we know we have to, but boy,
Yeah,
we sure don't want to. And it gets harder and harder with your grief. The
it does.
more you the more you don't do something, the harder it is to start it, either again or start it anew.
I agree with that. I think you get like stuck,
You
and
do.
you just like if you
You
just
do.
stay there, you don't progress, you don't do anything.
Yeah.
And so it
You
is, I
just,
agree, it's harder.
yeah, it is.
And when you start changing, it's like, oh, well, why didn't I do this sooner? Why didn't
Well,
I do this
absolutely.
sooner? Why
Yeah.
didn't I
Yeah.
read this sooner?
I remember after Tom died, I just reached a point where one day I got up to go to the kitchen to get a glass of water, and then I just stopped and I stood still and I thought, I don't want to live like this anymore. And from that day, from that point, I started to make decisions about what can I do to change this, because this is not the person I want to be a year from now.
Right. It's like that conscious choice to be, I'm done. I'm
Yeah.
done
And
with
I
what
think,
I'm doing and I'm going to move forward with something else.
yeah, yeah. And maybe that's one of the reasons why it's so difficult to tell how long grief lasts, is because everybody reaches that point at a different time.
Well, I don't think that grief ever just goes away. I
Oh,
don't
I
think
don't either. I'll
ever,
grieve for the rest of my life.
right. I think, because I know I talk a lot about like moving through grief,
Yeah.
but it's because there's really no words to use. It's not like
No,
you're gonna like, okay, yep, I'm done with grief today. We're done.
no,
Like, blah blah blah. I'll
no.
never experience it again, because we experience it all the time, and it just keeps compounding. And so I talk a lot about like the moving through the grief or
Hmm.
healing the grief or whatever, but you don't ever really do that. It just becomes less poignant in your life.
It morphs, I think, and becomes a part of your life. So that with every memory, that grief is still present.
Mhm.
But as you move forward, I think the memories can make you smile more than they can make you cry. The same memory,
Right.
as time moves on.
I agree with that. Like it's yeah, because every fall, like we have two, we have one in August and one in October.
Hmm.
Those are the death dates. And it's like
Hmm.
those are very poignant memories that you have,
Yes,
but
yes,
they don't hurt as much as what they once did. And
right.
now I can look back on them and see how far I've grown from the first one to the
Hmm.
second year, to the third year, to the fourth year,
Yeah, I
each
agree.
year subsequent after that.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm. I
Sucks,
agree.
still sucks.
It
Never gonna
does.
not suck.
It does, but you do. You just keep going, and you find other things to make you happy. You try to adjust and adapt.
I agree.
Hmm.
I agree.
Yep.
So talk to me about some of the things that you've done. I know you mentioned you have a podcast,
Uh-huh.
and that you go on vacations now with your brother and his wife,
Hmm.
to still do the vacation stuff.
Yep. Yep.
Talk to me about some of the other things that you do to like help you with the grief, because you have it, you have to work through it or on it or with it or whatever
Hmm.
term you're using. Tell me about some of those things.
I think probably the things that make me the happiest, keep me the busiest, if you will, is to learn something new.
Oh, I love that.
Just to learn something new. A lot of it started with the guests I've met because of my podcast. They would mention a specific theory or alternate therapy or something. Like, oh, let me give that a try. There was finger tapping and
Sure.
the alternate energy method or something like that. They're healing crystals and all of that. And I've kind of gotten immersed in all of those and checked them out and researched them and tried them.
Yeah.
And it's been fun. Some I've really enjoyed, some I've decided not for me. I don't quite get it.
Right.
I'm an eternal skeptic, but I still look back on it and think, that was interesting while I was researching that. So
Mhm.
just to pick a topic and try to learn something new. Now I'm working on some beading and making bracelets, and
Okay.
most recently discovered recycling strings from instruments like guitars and violins and creating bracelets out of those.
Oh,
Um,
fancy.
yeah, so I'm working on that now. And all those things I find they keep me busy, they keep me
Yeah.
distracted so I don't dwell on certain things, and they just make me happy. Yeah. That's probably the biggest thing I can say.
I do agree with you. I love to learn the new things, and I'm
Yeah.
very quick to like, okay, let's go painting today. Like I'll make a snap decision like okay, let's go painting today. Let's go for a hike today. Let's go do
Sure.
something. Let's go take a dance class. Let's go, whatever it is. Um,
Yeah.
because it takes your mind off of, so while you still have to go through the grief cycle and
Yep.
know that you're in it and know
Mm-hmm.
which season you're in of it, or which step or episode or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, it's fun to be able to have these little modalities to take you away from it when you
Right.
realize you're sitting in it too long
Yeah.
or too
Yeah.
much, or
Yep.
starting to do the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, or the
Uh-huh.
what ifs, or
Yep. Yeah, I have to be pretty selective because, of course, I can't take hikes in the woods anymore.
right.
I
Okay.
have a little scooter, but it doesn't really like, bumpy terrain. So
I have to
tree
get one of
roots
those
are out of the
four-wheel drive
question.
ones with
Oh,
those
well,
tracks
yeah.
on them.
Have you seen the price tags on those? A little
No, yes,
tank.
I
Yeah.
have.
So, and I love to dance. I danced a lot in my younger days, but
Okay.
I'm not able to do that anymore either. So I have to find things that interest me. The biggest interest in my life are my two grandsons. I have one that plays soccer. So
Okay.
I'm a soccer grandma, and the other one is a guitar player and is in a new band that is formed. So, there's going to his gigs and supporting
Aw.
him and everything. So those also, they give me lots and lots of joy. They really
Oh,
do.
I bet they do. That must be where
Yeah.
you get your guitar string. I was
That's
wondering
where I
where
got the
you get
first
your
set.
guitar strings
Well,
from.
a
I'm
lot of
like,
times music stores will give them to you.
oh,
They have,
really?
yeah, they usually throw them in the trash.
Oh, I would have never guessed because I'm not in that stuff. So I would have never guessed
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah. And if you ever don't know where to look for something new, just go to YouTube. That's all. Go to
I
YouTube.
agree. It is filled with, I mean, I have gotten like a couple master's degrees on YouTube just from Googling
Exactly.
different things, because
Yeah,
that's the first place that I go to when I don't know how to do something. It's like, okay, well,
exactly.
let me look this up.
Yep.
That and
Cooking, dancing, beading, crafts, music, anything you want. Anything you want.
oh man. So what are some of the other aspects of the aging process that you
Oh,
wanted to discuss, like for the grieving portion of it? Like I can theorize, like there's about a billion things. I couldn't imagine losing my spouse, first of all. Like,
yeah.
first of all, I couldn't imagine that.
That's been the hardest one. It really has. You might think that because you were with your parents so long and knew your mom or your dad for that many years, that would be the hardest. But losing Tom was harder, even though we weren't together. We weren't high school sweethearts like a lot of people are. But it was harder because he was part of the future that we were supposed to have together. And you think, I know when you get married, you say, till death do us part. But I don't think you take that phrase very seriously when you're saying it. You don't really expect that it's going to happen, you know,
I think
either
you
that or
expect
maybe
it
you
to
just
happen
think,
like way, way, way
yeah,
down
it's
the road.
just,
Like,
that's so far
right.
away. But I mean, it does happen. So I'm, if I were younger, I might think, well, I'd like to get out there and date again and everything. But the true piece that I really, really miss is conversations that we would have, whether it was in the car or on a trip or in a restaurant while we were eating dinner, just the general conversations. So that for a long time was very, very difficult.
Right.
Um, what did I do? I got creative. I got a bird. I got a parrot that at least understood when I spoke to it or
I was gonna
seemed
say,
to.
does it talk back?
Well, eventually, eventually she
Right.
said a couple words. She would say
Oh,
her name,
nice.
Phoebe, and she was free flight. So in the morning when I woke up, I would open her cage and she would
Okay.
come out when she chose to and fly around. And she was even potty trained. She even went back to her cage to go to the bathroom.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, I hand raised her from a baby. So like every morning she would fly over and she would sit on my shoulder or on my thigh. And if I ate breakfast, she wanted to have a piece of egg or something. So she was a
Oh,
lot of company.
yeah.
So for some people it's a dog or a cat. For me, it
Yeah.
was a bird because she was a lot lighter than a dog and a lot easier to
Yeah.
take care of.
Yep.
Um, I guess as far as the aging, combining with that grief when you lose your partner or your spouse, you get creative, or you should get creative. I mentioned before, I have dry skin, and every so often I like lotion rubbed on my back. Well, Who's going to do that?
Right.
But if you check and you search and you talk to people, you find out that there is something that looks like a bath brush, but
Yeah.
it's a lotion applicator with a
Yeah.
pad, and it works. It doesn't work
It's
well.
not
It's
the
not as
same,
good
but
as a pair of hands,
right.
but it's doable. Have trouble putting your socks on? There's something to help with that. You get creative, you explore, and you find something that will work for the time being. Because the only other option is to kind of give up and go
Right.
live in a facility where someone will take care of you. And I am not ready for that.
I don't blame you.
I'm not ready for that, you know. And my daughter, God bless her, she and her husband thought, well, why don't you come live with us? And when I said, well, I don't think I really need help now,
Right.
my son-in-law very kindly said, yes, but if you're living with us, then we'll know when you start to need help.
That's true.
And then
That's
we won't
true.
get that phone call that you've fallen, taken the trash out, and broken a hip.
Yeah. Because my
Yeah.
mom lives with us. She's lived with us since my father
Mhm.
passed.
Yeah.
Um, and it was just, I guess it was just a natural thing. Like
Yeah.
you're in, and her and my husband get along smashingly well.
I get along very well with my son-in-law too.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I
they pick
consider him
up
a
on me
very
all
good
the
friend.
time.
Yeah.
All the
We haven't
time.
done that yet, but yeah, it's been about a
Right?
year now. But I have to say that that added to my happiness, and that that coupled with everything else I think I've been trying to do really has made me, I'm probably happier now than I've ever been in my life.
Right. I would think it's because if you were by yourself, you'd have more time
Yeah.
alone to be able to
Mhm.
think upon it. Because I know
Right.
my mom has said
You
that as
do
well.
you dwell on things sometimes.
Right. Well, because no one's
Yeah.
talking to you, so you have time, you have
Exactly.
nothing but time to think.
Exactly. Yeah.
Unless you do one of the other culprits of like
Right.
working or over
Yep.
volunteering or
Yep.
whatever to get away from it.
Yeah. And I volunteer. I volunteer for a hospice home. I'm on their board of directors. I'm actually their treasurer. And I still travel. In fact, Saturday I'm taking my car and I'm driving all by myself from New York State to Texas.
Well, good for
About a
you.
two and a half day drive. Um, but yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I love audiobooks, and I love driving. So, and then when I get there, that's where my younger daughter Kelly lives. I'm picking her up and we're driving to Galveston and going on a 5-day cruise to Cozumel.
Well, good
So,
for you. That sounds
y-
fascinating.
yeah, you just get creative and do it anyway, I guess. Do it anyway.
I like that. Do it anyway. Do it anyway. So you said you started a podcast
Yes.
2.5 years ago or
Two
something
and a
like
half
that.
years ago. Yeah. And that was just kind of on a whim. I had been facilitating a bereavement group for a hospice home locally, and then COVID hit. So we had to stop meeting. And as COVID waned a bit, the home asked me to start the group back up again. And I said, one of my mantras for volunteering is when I start to give more than I get, I have to reevaluate.
Yeah, that's a good
Because part of
mantra.
volunteering for me is that it rewards me as well, whether it's just the feeling in my heart that I get, feeling a warmth or whatever. And I said, we're only reaching like two people each time. Grief is bigger than that. I see it in the
Absolutely.
families,
Yeah.
that lose someone here. And I couldn't figure out what to do, but I really didn't want to do the group again. There were a few of us in the room, my daughter Stephanie included. We're just talking back and forth. And I swear, divine intervention, the word podcast came into my head. I had not even listened to podcasts. I knew nothing about podcasts, but the word podcast filled it into my head. So I spoke it. I said, podcast. And my daughter, Stephanie, bless her heart, said, I'll help you, Mom. Let's do it. And 6 weeks later, we had 5 episodes taped and ready to go. And we launched our podcast, and we've been going ever since.
Well, good for you. That is
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, with this one here, I decided that I wanted to start the podcast, and same thing. Like I put it out there, and people started signing up, and I'm like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
It took me, I want to say like 6 weeks
It
to get
does. It takes
everything
a while.
going,
Yeah.
like the intros and the outros, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then get some recordings in, all that stuff. And it took probably
Yeah.
about 6 weeks. So it just launched on August 1st. So
Congratulations.
thank you. And I had,
Yeah.
I think at the time of the launching, I had 10 episodes recorded.
That's great. That's great. You need to
So,
have a few at least, but I had others lined up to interview. So when we got
yep,
5, we went ahead and started it. And that was 142 episodes ago.
that was
So
fantastic. What's the name
yeah,
of it?
and I
Just
enjoy
so
it. The
the
name of it
listeners.
is As I Live and Grieve.
Okay.
I took the concept that I honestly feel I'm going to grieve for the rest of my life, whether it's grieve the loss of my husband or grieve because I'm getting older. It doesn't really matter, but I'm going to grieve. I'm going to know grief from now until the day I die. And so we were thinking, and then I got frustrated and I said, oh my gosh, as I live and breathe, can I just think of something? So divine intervention, I don't know. Again, I don't know. So we just changed the word breathe to grieve and it became As I Live and Grieve.
I love it. That is
Mm-hmm.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I absolutely love that. So, do you have any other plans like for writing books or starting another podcast
Well,
or
I
doing a world tour or what are you doing?
of doing a world tour. I'd love to go on tour around the world.
Right?
I don't see that in the cards though, but you never know. Um, I did publish a book back in 2003. It was a memoir, actually,
Okay.
because at one point in my life, I traveled with a carnival and
Oh,
sold
wow.
tickets. I was the ticket seller. So that was called Fox in the Box, Memoirs of a Carny Ticket Seller. And I actually traveled with a carnival with an infant, Kelly, who was born just after
Oh,
we joined the show, and Stephanie, who was the princess of the carnival, actually. She was adored. Um,
okay.
so I did publish
Your
that
husband
one.
was with the carnival too?
That was a boyfriend at the time. It was before
Okay.
Tom and I met. So I traveled with a boyfriend at the time.
Okay.
But interesting stories
Yes, I
and
can imagine.
fun. But I just kind of wanted to get it in writing for the kids as a legacy. I'm working with a couple other people. One of my volunteer efforts is that veterans veterans don't like to talk about their
No.
lives or their military service. My husband Tom was retired Army, served in Vietnam as a combat medic, and he was very much the same. So I got a call a few weeks ago from one of his friends, a Vietnam vet, who was given a book for Christmas by his grandchildren. And it was Tell Me Your Story, Poppy. And it was filled
Mhm.
with questions. He's suffering from a few disorders that make it difficult for him to write and to think and carry on conversations. So I offered to help him answer the questions and I'll document them in the book and everything so he can have this for his kids this coming Christmas. That caught on. So I've got 2 or 3 others that are waiting for me to help them as well.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that. So
Yeah.
my mom does genealogy, has done it for
Oh,
decades and decades.
yeah.
Since
Yeah.
before I was born, probably 50 years she's been doing genealogy. And I always think about what's going to happen, like what legacy is going to be left behind. How will people know you in the future, say 2 or 3 generations? Well, they'll
Exactly.
remember you. And a lot of the people, because she's been hunting for this great, however many great grandfather for probably 40 years.
Oh my
You can
goodness.
find him in one spot and in another spot, but she can't find anything else besides that. Nothing. And so
Hmm.
it's just really frustrating for her. And so a friend of mine and I, we talked about going into the nursing homes and talking to the
Mm-hmm.
residents in the nursing
Yeah.
homes and to just get their story and hear them, like the ones that don't get a lot of visitors or not
Mm-hmm.
very many or none at all, because there's some people,
Right.
but their stories are fascinating.
Sure they
Like, I
are.
would have never guessed you were in the circus. I would have guessed. Like these are stories as well that are getting lost with all of this, with
Oh,
time.
absolutely.
And so the
Absolutely.
and I just figured, record it and then maybe publish a small book with their permission and give
Uh-huh.
proceeds back to them. Like, I don't want
Yeah.
proceeds, just give it back to them. But like that way, then there's a record of maybe the future generations finding their
Right. Right.
grandmother or grandfather, whatever.
Yeah, we actually had a guest in our podcast that has written a book. There's a daughter version and a son version, and it's questions your daughter wishes she had asked. It's similar to this book I mentioned about Tell Me Your
Yeah.
Story, Poppy, but
Yeah.
it's all questions like, what was the first concert you attended? And it's all just general curious questions. And you're to go through the book and answer the questions and then leave that for future generations. And it's a way that they will get to know you, not just the serious things like what kind of a job did you have, but those other
Right.
things too.
The
Like,
little things that make you you.
exactly, like what did you get grounded for as a child, or did you ever lie, things like that. What do you wish you had done? And so those books are out there and available, and I find them fascinating. I've
Yeah.
already started to fill mine out so I can leave it for my daughters. They're questions that they've not asked to this point, but someday they'll be curious.
And
But
even
it's a
if they
fun way.
don't, it's a fun way to get to know you, like going forward. Like,
Right.
because at some point we're all going to pass away. At some point we will.
Absolutely. Yep.
And at that point, you can't create a book at that point. It's going to be hard for
No,
them to know the things that you didn't talk about, or maybe they had forgotten, or they were too young to
that's
know,
right.
or something like that. So
That's
I
right.
love any of those things, doing
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
things. So
Yeah.
happy.
And it's fun to do, as I'm having fun doing it.
Yeah. I had another friend of mine, her father, she had sent it to, I think it was her father, a booklet similar to that.
Mhm.
And every day he would just write down a
Yeah.
little snippet about himself, and he would send it to her. Well, she had all of those bound, I believe, and put into a book of her father. I think
Yeah.
it was just for herself, but that
Yeah.
way she could just open it every day and just read one. And I'm like,
Right.
that
Right.
is beautiful.
Yeah. It gives people, it gives future generations an idea of who they came from, not just this was my great great grandmother's name, but this is
Right.
a
And
little
that's all you
about her.
have.
So you learn not only about that person, but about the era that they lived in
Yeah.
and what it was like and what was different.
Right. Yeah. Because like you mentioned, in the 70s, there weren't cell phones. You had none of
No,
that
I
stuff.
remember the first color TV actually. And I certainly remember somebody saying at one point, everybody's going to have a computer in their home. And I said,
Right?
and
Right?
yet in my lifetime, it's happened. So imagine the other things.
Yeah. There's been a lot of things that's happened in your life, in my life, and
Yeah.
everyone's life. It's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Kathy, I thank you so much for being a part of this podcast.
Oh, it's
Thank
been
you
my
so much
pleasure.
for coming on here. And do you have any final words for the guests listening on how to navigate grief, manage grief, on things to do, anything?
Well, the only thing I want to say to people is that just as your grief is personal and unique to you, you are the only one that can do something about it, whatever that is. So at some point, you certainly allow yourself to grieve, be patient with yourself as you grieve. But at some point, you're going to start to get that little restless feeling. It might be deep, deep within you, but you're going to start to get a little edgy, a little itchy, a little restless. And use that feeling to help you think about what you need or want to change. Get creative, find ways to adapt. But at some point, you're going to get up off that sofa when you're ready and you're going to move forward. And I only wish that you'll be as lucky as I am and redefine yourself to the happiest you've ever been.
That was pretty damn near poetic. I loved it. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for those amazing words of wisdom
Oh,
and
you're
comfort.
welcome.
And thank you so much again for being on here and being a part of this podcast.
Truly my pleasure, Faith. Good luck with the podcast. I look forward to listening.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this special episode of Release. All the links plus a few extras are posted in the show notes below. And if you think someone you know could benefit by listening to this episode, please share it with them. And as always, keep going, keep being, keep doing. You are amazing.